Next little video is going to be about the limitations question. Now, to be honest, this is essentially an unreliability question. So this is a reasonably new form of question that the Department of Education has introduced, and they will ask what are the limitations of the source. What they are asking about, and the word to remember with limitations, is about bias, but it is very much connected to the same ideas about reliability and unreliability. So this question is essentially saying to you, this source has limitations. It is unreliable to some extent. Why is that, and how is the bias playing a role in that? So what you want to look at when you're answering this kind of question is always whose perspective is shown and whose is left out. So this connects to that idea of the provenance of the source. In the example that we've been looking at with the French Revolution, it might be with the English versus the French perspective. When we get to talking about the Cold War, we might be saying, okay, is this cartoon or the source from the perspective of the Americans or from the USSR? There are always different players in history, and we want to think about who is creating this, what are they showing, what are they leaving out. The other thing that you are going to include again is evidence of biased language or images, and again, you can quote to back this up. And as with the reliability question, you actually need to explain, not just, oh, it's an American source, therefore it's unreliable. You need to say, how is this a limitation? Why is this potentially not going to give me the fullest version, fullest understanding of the events? So if we think about this cartoon that we've been looking at, the example of the cartoonist who is from England, it's published in 1819, which is after the period of the Reign of Terror, not long after, but after enough for it not to be a primary source of the exact time that things were happening. And what we're going to think about is, in this question, what are the limitations of source D for knowing about the Reign of Terror? Now, we've basically got the same little line of attack that we had with the unreliability question. Where is it from? Who is it from? When is it from? Which we get from the top of the source. And then we want to think about evidence of biased imagery or language. So we need to look over here for this information about where this person is from, when is it created. And then we're also going to look at the source itself in terms of the words and also the imagery. So my answer here, which is quite similar to my unreliability answer, the source was written after the events of the Reign of Terror in 1819, not 1794, which means it may not be accurately describing events as they happened. The source has a strong bias against the French revolutionaries, as the English cartoonist wants to show the revolutionaries as violent monsters dripping with blood. So in this first part, I'm engaging with when the source was created, and in the second part, I'm giving evidence of this bias that the French against the French revolutionaries that the cartoonist is showing by giving this imagery, the specific imagery of the violent monsters dripping with blood. So when you read this limitations question, you don't get to answer this question and say, there are no limitations, actually the source is reliable. The examiner is saying to you, there are issues of bias and unreliability in the source by asking this question as limitations. So you don't get to say, actually, I think that there aren't limitations. You need to answer the question as it stands and explain why there might be some evidence of bias in the source.